Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about opportunities for traders at the UK's new Freeports, particularly today, Freeport East. Brought to you by the Institute of Export and International Trade in partnership with Hutchison Ports. My name is William Barnes-Graham, the Senior Content Editor at the Institute, and I will be your host for the next hour or so. And it's great to see so many of you already on today's call. Warm welcome to you all, and thank you for your time today. Next slide, please. Here you will see that we have two fantastic speakers today from the Institute and Freeport East. Later on, we'll be hearing from Kevin Shakespeare, the Director of the Institute's Academy and a regular on our webinar programme, as some of you will know. After Kevin, we'll then hear from Mark Taylor, the Acting Chief Executive of Freeport East and a member of the executive team at Hutchison Ports. You can read more about our esteemed speakers on the slide here, and we'll be sharing this pack with you all afterwards as well. But on the next slide, before we get properly started, we're going to run a quick poll on the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to launch this poll now. And this is to get a sense of how aware you are of the benefits of Freeports. Of course, the UK announced last year there's going to be 8 new Freeports and a couple are already in action. So really interesting to see what you say to that poll there. While you were answering that, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question panel on the control window to the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to get to a number of your questions towards the end of the webinar, though please bear in mind we have already received a lot of questions in advance, so may not be able to get to all of your queries today. If you feel as though your question has not been answered, please do review our technical helpline or training and consultancy offerings, which we'll be talking about later in the webinar. Secondly, you will receive access to today's slide pack and a recording of the webinar in a follow-up email we will be sending over the next day or so. So please do try to listen in as carefully as possible as you can to today's presentation. Just one more point on questions, by the way. Always keen to make the point that if your questions are concise and easy for me to read, I am more likely to ask them. So please do bear that in mind. Right, I'm going to close that poll now and share the response. So thank you everyone for answering. Really interesting as ever to see the level of awareness amongst you. Only 4% of you are very aware, 35% of you quite aware, but half of you, over half of you are either not very aware or not at all aware, 11% not at all aware, 50% not very. So we hope this webinar will be useful in raising awareness. I mean, Kevin, if I can bring you on at this point, are you surprised at all by the response to that poll there?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for everybody who completed a poll, and good morning and happy New Year to everybody on the webinar today. I guess the sort of levels of not very aware, not aware, probably slightly higher, but as well as you said, Will, I hope today that the benefits of Freeports will come out, and certainly the aspect I'll be talking about will be around the customs and trade aspects of Freeports, because there's been a lot of publicity around Freeports, around the tax benefits, certainly very important in terms of clean energy, levelling up agenda and things like that. So hopefully we can bring out today the benefits in terms of trade links, trade lanes, trade corridors, and also customs benefits, which would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And yeah, as Kevin said, thank you everyone for answering that poll. So if we move on to the next slide now, it's my pleasure to, as ever, hand over to Kevin to start the presentation. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much indeed. So what we're going to look at just for the next 15 to 20 minutes is slides on the benefits of Freeports from a trade perspective and a UK trade perspective, but also that benefits suppliers and customers in other parts of the world as well, both deep sea and short sea. So if we have the next slide, please. So I normally start presentations of this nature by focusing on the compliance aspect, and there's no doubt in terms of trade, again, deep sea, short sea. When I say short sea to the European Union, for example, deep sea to the rest of the world, that trade compliance is really, really important. And I think it's very important to recognise free ports. There's been, again, some publicity around free trade zones, special economic zones, free ports around the use of the free ports in terms of certain types of activity. But there's a lot of work taking place globally, and clearly the UK free port operators are very much involved in this, in making sure that the key principles of safe zones with the World Free Zones Organization, the OECD Code of Conduct for free zones, is very much adopted, and that is also covering the types of goods that actually operate in free ports as well. So if we have the next slide, please. So let's just reflect on the characteristics of successful free ports, and again, this is using the principles both of global and trying to apply it to UK as well. So clearly the UK, and very much so in the context of Freeport East, has access to both deep sea and short sea crossings, which is really important. So in terms of integrated supply chains, and if you're a business having different suppliers, different customers in different parts of the world, it actually creates that good opportunity. And it also creates an opportunity we're seeing globally on intermodal freight as well. So we're seeing more goods move through by rail, and clearly Freeport East is well situated in terms of rail connectivity, and I'm sure Mark will go through that later. So it's very important to recognise those aspects of intermodal as well. More and more goods and types of goods are starting to move by rail. I was on a call this morning, early morning, with a few of the African free trade zones, and products such as coffee and produce, coffee and tea are increasingly being moved by rail. So important to see deep sea, short sea, intermodal, but also with that focus on rail. And also it's important the types of goods in successful free ports, and very much so in the case of UK free ports. Clean energy, net zero becomes absolutely fundamental. Medical devices also becomes key, nutritional foods also, and recyclable trade. So the way trade is starting to change going forward, when we start talking about carbon credits, around providing evidence that goods are recycled, waste, really becomes important. So again, the types of industries in successful free ports start to move towards these types of industries and sectors. It's important to recognise that a free port shouldn't just be a free port on its own. It needs to converse and interact with the local economy for both skills and industry as well. So working with existing skills and industry hubs in the local economy is very, very important for a free port. It shouldn't just be seen in isolation as this piece of land that just exists. And also I'm going to talk about in the next slide around trade and transport corridors. So building links to global and regional logistics hubs becomes increasingly important. And the way international trade is shaping up with supply chains, even post-COVID, is regional logistics hubs are also becoming very, very important as well. If we have the next slide, please. So building on trade corridors. So as I speak, there's a lot of activity taking place on trade corridors at the moment. The Institute ourselves are involved in a number of trade corridor works, including a big project with Africa, with Kenya and East Africa currently, which is looking to build on UK trade, free trade agreements and economic partnership agreements, which increasingly have clauses on them around trade and customs facilitations. So there are in a lot of the modern trade agreements that the UK has signed and is entering into, clauses on trade facilitation and customs facilitation. So really it's building on UK trade deals, but creating more this culture of trade facilitation and trade compliance, which builds in very much with the UK government strategy around border innovation hub, future borders and ecosystem of trust as well. So effectively using traceability, provenance in the supply chain as well, which also becomes very important, and reusing existing data inputs in actually using the facilitation. So there's a lot going on in this space, and also the Institute are involved in projects around sustainability ratings as well. So the actors in the supply chain have an ESG sustainability rating, which has lots of benefits in terms of connectivities within supply chain, and also this trusted trader concept. So if anyone is very much involved in these activities, you're very welcome to contact the Institute. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, sorry, I should say next slide, next bit here. So some of the benefits of trade corridors, but we also need to think of trade corridors in the context of free ports as well. Free ports do facilitate trade corridors. We look at free ports like Miami in the United States, like Tangier Med. Lots of that connectivity and that access as well, building trade corridors and linking them to free ports. So we have outcomes in terms of reduction in cost of importing and exporting, faster export turnaround times, improved trade and customs compliance. So the compliant traders get the benefit. And that's really important to stress as well. This concept of trade corridors and free ports is very much built around compliance, compliant traders, having good record keeping, justifying that you understand the origin of the goods, the classification codes built on the harmonized system codes at global level, and the correct customs valuation. So compliance, and a term I'm increasingly using, trade compliance plus trade facilitation equals competitive advantage. So if we have the next slide, please. So looking at customs benefits in a free port, it's probably fair to say a lot of the commentary in around UK free ports has been less focused on customs benefits. There are clearly lots of other benefits around free ports, which we will go into in this webinar. But more focus is around the customs aspects as well of free ports, and using best practice globally to apply it to the United Kingdom as well. Now, it's all very well saying for customs entry purposes, the free port is not considered within the customs territory, but it's very much free ports must have compliant traders and good products, the likes of clean energy, net zero, medical devices, nutritional foods, and elements like that. But there are elements that customs entry process when goods are removed from the free port. A customs bond is not required for goods in a free port, which does relieve impact on banking facilities. Yes, I know there are certain easements under the UK's border operated model for traders that are not considered high risk. And other aspects which are important is around allowable and permissible cargo, is that both foreign and domestic goods may be placed in a free port. So it's very much important here to consider the domestic link to free ports as well. Free ports are not just about goods coming from overseas, staying in the free port, and then being re-exported. There also has to be benefits for the local economy when goods are released from the free port, say raw materials taken into production into finished goods, when they enter the local economy as well. So those mixed benefits and that support to the local economy is also fundamental to free ports. Next slide, please. So clearly some of the customs benefits, the one that's focused on a lot is this concept of duty payment. So using customs procedures, special procedures such as customs warehousing, inward processing. This concept is that under these special procedures is that import duty is only payable when goods enter the local economy. And if the goods are re-exported, the import duty and import VAT is not payable. Yes, that is a key benefit of customs benefit of free ports, Yes, you could have customs warehousing and inward processing, for example, outside of Freeport, but it's not the only benefits. There are other customs benefits as well. And another one is movement of goods within the Freeport itself. So goods can move unrestricted within the Freeport. Now, clearly there are examples like Tangier Med again, where there's a good movement of materials, producers, raw materials, part finished goods, semi-finished goods to final goods, and sectors such as automotive, medical devices again, and agri-food processing. So there's some good examples globally there of how goods can move unrestricted within the Freeport to effectively cover those different processes of the supply chain. If we have the next slide, please. Now, the slide I'm going to go through now is quite busy, but I'm going to go through it in stages. So actually talk about the actual illustrate the Freeport process. So we have effectively the part of the supply chain, the goods dispatched from the exporter's premises, for example, in another country to a UK Freeport. So if we have the next, please. So again, to reinforce the concept that foreign and domestic goods may be placed into a Freeport. It doesn't just need to be foreign goods. So the goods are then shipped, for example, transported by sea in our example here. And if we go on next, please. And then goods arrive at the Freeport without customs intervention. But again, we must go back to the principles of the OECD, the World Free Zones Organization, in terms of safe, legitimate trade. Goods can be held in the Freeport for an unlimited period of time, no customs bond required to use customs special procedures. And if we have next, please. And then we have using our example here, advanced processing and production takes place at the Freeport. Again, it's not just trading goods. Also, you have this element of services as well. So, trading goods, trading services where value is added. And goods, as we've indicated, can move unrestricted in the Freeport. If we have the next, please. And then onwards, goods can leave the Freeport into the local economy or for re-export. And I know under UK Freeports, this concept of duty inversion is harder to see, partly because the way the UK global import tariff is structured, which is beneficial for UK importers. So no customs declarations or customs procedures until goods leave the Freeport. The import tariff does not apply until goods leave the Freeport, but then if they're re-exported, effectively the import VAT, the import duty doesn't apply. So we can see, if you like, the Freeport process, but Freeports have said they should be seen for customs purposes, but they should also be seen for benefits of specific sectors, the actual good that Freeports can actually achieve, and the skills agenda as well. Now, if we think of the UK, and the UK is clearly negotiating and in negotiation with certain countries and regions in terms of free trade agreements. Currently, there are clearly UK import tariff supply where trade agreements don't currently exist. The United States, China, and the Middle East. Some ASEAN countries, clearly the UK is heavily involved in CPTPP, which could change things, and South America as well. So we can see some of the benefits here in terms of certain imports from certain countries. And clearly you also have the Gulf states as well. But again, we know there are trade negotiations with the likes of being discussed with the likes of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. So that's just to give you an overview of the Freeport process. If we have the next slide, please. So in terms of the Institute, we've been sort of thinking about a lot about what our Freeport proposition could look like. So we're very much here to professionalise, to service the industry and support members and the industry as a whole. So some of the things we've been talking about is customs and trade help desk to support businesses in the Freeport and the local economy. We also, we have a lot of help desk support and a lot of trade and customs specialists already. The skills and education agenda, including apprenticeships and qualifications for both businesses in the Freeport and the local economy. And the UK has, for example, established the Institute, for example, established the UK Customs Academy with over 9,000 learners now. So we're very experienced in professional qualifications. Support for development of trade corridors and ecosystem of trust, which I referred to earlier. News feeds and trade opportunities. So we're building out a lot this key insight into trade developments, not just in the UK, but internationally, also building on the principles, for example, of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement and what's happening globally around trade facilitation, single trade window, for example. Business compliance health checks. So we provide a number of health checks for businesses to make sure they're trade compliant currently. And I think also, and if not most importantly, a voice for businesses to improve trade facilitation. So we're always very keen to hear from businesses. We do a lot of surveys, we engage with our members a lot to improve trade facilitation. So it's changing. I've referred to WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. Trade compliance, trade facilitation are equally very important. If we have a next slide, please. So I think it's come to an end. Just a summary, I've sort of referred to some of the services that the Institute are introducing around the Freeport process, and it just reinforces, I guess, some of the areas I've referred to, such as our technical helpline, to support businesses, to training courses, to trade surgeries, the compliance elements as well. And also we have a big series for our members around lunchtime learning, which covers a lot of key and latest initiatives in trade, customs, logistics and supply chain. So on that note, I'll pass it back and thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. As ever, really interesting presentation there. I always learn something new every time you do a presentation. I think today it was about the tea and coffee being increasingly moved by rail in Africa. There's a nice little tidbit of insight there. I'm going to launch our second poll now. Just going to ask you, which of the following benefits of Freeports is most valuable to your business? Options there include local investment and jobs, streamlined customs processes, taxation benefits, business rates relief, and other. Just while people are answering that poll, Kevin, if I may, a couple of questions we had in advance actually, and they're both around origin and Freeports. So Jutta has asked, do any of the UK's free trade agreements accept goods made in a Freeport as having UK origin? And then Gavin has asked a question around re-exports. He's asked, do Freeports have any impact on rules of origin on imported then exported products? So over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much for the questions, and I hope I've understood them correctly, and apologies if I've misinterpreted your question. With regard to the origin of goods, it's fair to say, obviously, that the rules of origin effectively are set at a global level, and clearly are interpreted and detailed within certain trade agreements. So the actual principle around rules of origin for Freeports is similar, I guess, for rules of origin generally. So if you are bringing goods in, let's say from a non-UK destination, and then you're re-exporting them to meet the requirements of UK rules of origin, it would be similar principles that would apply. So elements as to the level of non-originating materials referred to as max non, what the level of transformation is, the processing is in those goods. And obviously what the invoice value is as well. So those principles which would apply in general international trade, if we call it that, would also apply within the actual concept of Freeports itself. So it's important to recognise that if you're bringing goods into a Freeport, what is the level of transformation, what is the level of non-originating materials, what is the invoice value? Bearing in mind that under UK trade agreements, but not just UK trade agreements, that the actual percentage of maximum non-originating materials will vary depending on the actual types of goods and ultimately the commodity code as defined within the trade agreement itself. So those are the principles, whether it's goods exported from the UK, and also similar principles, I guess, for goods coming into the UK. Clearly, the actual declaration, or sorry, the actual duty of its release to the home economy into free circulation will again depend on where the goods have come from, which country, whether there is a trade agreement with that country, and what the rules of origin are under the trade agreement. So I hope I've answered that question. Apologies if I misinterpreted any aspects of the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And we have done various webinars previously on Origin and kind of the stipulations around it, the rules in different trade agreements, and we'll continue to do so in the new year. Just one more question, actually, Robert. Kevin, just from Robert, it's just a clarification. Can you confirm that no customs declaration is required when goods arrive in a free port?
So again, a lot depends on the interpretation there. But what I can say is the general principle is that the customs declaration or the customs entry, as it's referred to in this example, is not made until goods leave the free port. Now, what we would stress is that that is the principle of free ports and free trade zones. The actual policy on how it's going to work in practice will be subject to discussion, but using, if you like, practice around the world, the concept of customs entry is not made until the actual goods leave the free port. How the UK obviously interprets that will vary and will differ, and clearly there has been a customs iteration policy from government, again, the Institute will be involved hopefully in further iterations of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'm just going to close the poll there and share the results. So the response is over 50% say streamlined customs processes, 51%, and then that's followed up by 17% taxation benefits, and then fewer people saying local investment and jobs, 8%, or business rates relief, 3%, 21% of you saying other. Both people said other. It'd be interesting to see what kind of which benefit you view as most valuable. So if you can let us know in the exit survey at the end of the webinar, that would be really useful. Thank you. Right, we'll come back to more questions at the end of the webinar, but it is now my delight on the next slide to welcome on Mark Taylor from Freeports East. He's going to talk about Freeports East as one of the examples of Freeports, and really look forward to hearing about this one. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Will, and good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year from me also. So very pleased to be joining this webinar in conjunction with the Institute to talk about Freeport East and to highlight the benefits that come from being part of a Freeport. I think Kevin has explained superbly well in terms of the customs side. I'm going to focus a little bit more around what the opportunity is for the region, for the country, and for UK businesses and also inward investors. So on this first slide, Freeport East is made up of 3 sites in Felixstowe, Gateway 14 and Harwich, which I'll explain more. And we have a line in terms of offering a global free port for a global Britain. Now, in March 2021, the Chancellor announced 8 free ports in England, offering these advantageous tax and customs rules, and Freeport East was one of those 8. Freeport East, as you can see from the slide, is centred around the Hutchison ports of Felixstowe and Harwich on the east coast, with very, very good proximity to offshore wind, and I'll explain a little bit more there as well. But also there's an opportunity within our Freeport to develop a clean maritime hub, given all of the transactions and the modes of transport that go through those 2 ports. And as I say, our strapline, I'll say probably more than once throughout this presentation, is that we're offering a global free port for a global Britain. Next slide, please. Free ports are public and private partners are involved in free ports because, as mentioned earlier, it is there also to offer wider benefit to the local economy. You see here all of the stakeholders involved in Freeport East, which include the 2 ports owned and operated by Hutchison Ports of Felixstowe and Harwich, but also we have within our partnership the 2 county councils of Suffolk and Essex. We have 3 district councils in Tendring, Mid Suffolk and East Suffolk. East Suffolk are our lead authority as well, which is very important for free ports. All free ports need a lead authority that make sure that we are controlling the Freeport in the right way to deliver on the policy objectives. Also, the two LEPs from New Anglia and South East LEP, as well as Haven Gateway Partnership. So it's a very good collaboration also with the Harwich Haven Authority, who serve both ports. Next slide, please. So why do we class ourselves as being a global free port for a global Britain? Well, if you look at the geography of Felixstowe and Harwich, we have some of the finest and most effective infrastructure connecting ourselves to the world, but also to the country. We have deep water quays, some of the deepest water within the UK. The berths at Felixstowe are currently down to 16 meters, but will go down to 18 meters in short term. And also the actual estuary itself will be being dredged shortly as well. From a trade point of view, Felixstowe is the UK's biggest and busiest container terminal, handling a large proportion of UK trade that comes in and out of the country, around 40%. But if you take that from a Far East trade lane, it's around 60%. And if you drill down even further into those mega vessels that call around the sea lanes of the world, it's around 70% of all those mega vessels are calling into Felixstowe. Interestingly as well, we have ferry services in both Felixstowe and Harwich. And that comes on to the point that Kevin made around that combination of deep sea and short sea. We have 7 daily ferry services between Felixstowe and Harwich and continental Europe. So this presents quite a unique opportunity within a free port context for that combination of deep sea and short sea. And then road connections, has been a huge upgrade in the A14. A lot of money spent on that road, and I benefited from that, travelling to and from the Midlands into Felixstowe. And also Harwich has got well connections to the A12 and the A14 as well. And then in terms of rail, Port of Felixstowe in particular has the most intermodal connections of any port in the UK, and this week announced its 38th container train service leaving the terminal. And you can see the connections there reach throughout the whole of the country. And that's why we say, again, from our perspective, Freeport East, centred around those 2 ports, offer a unique opportunity, not just for global trade, but also for a global Britain. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the aims of Freeport policy, the government have 3 main aims. Firstly, it's around boosting global trade and investment. Secondly, it's, in their words, creating hotbeds of innovation, those new industries that are going to be able to scale up in a post-Brexit environment. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is around the creation of new jobs, skills and levelling up within regions of the country that require that added investment, that added impetus. Now, how does Freeport East align to those 3 objectives? From our perspective, very, very well, and hence why we were awarded one of the Freeports. Firstly, from a trade point of view, we are the only UK port that sit within the top 50 largest ports within the world. So we are in that Champions League as the Port of Felixstowe from a container traffic perspective, but also that possibility to create what we call a springboard into Europe, where you have those deep sea cargoes flowing into Felixstowe, with an opportunity for the Freeport and UK businesses and inward investors to do some additional work and then springboard those finished products into Europe using the ferry services in Felixstowe and Harwich. From an innovation point of view, we are very, very well placed. We already have established connections with the Cambridge High Tech Cluster, which is very close to the corridor serving Felixstowe and Harwich, but also BT Industrial Park is very close by to our Freeport and within our Freeport region, which is the UK's largest R&D facility. And we're at the centre of the Eastern region's clean energy cluster. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. One aspect, unfortunately, which is not necessarily well known, is that within our region we do have some quite high levels of deprivation. In fact, we have particular area within Tendring, which is the most deprived neighbourhood in the whole of the UK. And there are areas within Tendring and Ipswich which are in that 10% most deprived areas within England. So bringing a Freeport into the region and benefiting the local community with new skills, new opportunities, working closely with those further and higher education providers is what Freeport is looking to deliver as a benefit. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of tax benefits, Kevin's already explained a little bit around the customs benefits and where they are. And it was interesting to note in the survey just ahead of this presentation that only 70% of you were seeing the tax benefits as being of most interest. But from our perspective, this is actually where there is some real opportunity for UK businesses and inward investors. The Chancellor pictured there, who actually wrote about a paper on Freeports many years ago. Interesting that he actually comes to deliver on that policy. Now he's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Is offering a fantastic package of benefits to encourage that inward investment and through the expansion and additionality of UK businesses, ranging from 100% relief on stamp duty, land tax, enhanced structures and buildings allowances than you would normally expect, enhanced capital allowances to encourage that inward investment within the Freeport. And then from an OPEX point of view, reductions and zero NI contributions for businesses for a large period for the first 9 years on the first £25,000 of any new employee joining businesses within the Freeport, and then also relief from business rates for businesses within the Freeport. So it is a very, very generous package, and that's why I think at the end of this presentation, the Freeport tax benefits may be higher up the agenda. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the Freeport East sites, it's fairly straightforward. We have 3 tax sites where those tax benefits mentioned on the previous slide are available. And then in addition, we have customs sites where those simplified customs procedures that Kevin mentioned are also available within the Freeport. Our Freeport tax sites are in the Port of Felixstowe itself. You see the picture there. That's a mock-up of what the Freeport tax site will look like, but you can see it very adjacent to some of those deep water berths at Felixstowe. Gateway 14, which is a site in Stowmarket, owned by the Mid Suffolk Council, but operated by a company called Gateway 14. It's the largest development in East Anglia. And then last but by no means least, the Harwich tax site, which is our largest tax site. Now, combined, those Freeport sites, both tax sites and custom sites, offer 275 hectares of opportunity for development to support UK businesses and inward investment. And in my money, that is around the size of 400 football pitches. So it's a huge opportunity adjacent to 2 fabulous ports with an opportunity to deliver on those Freeport objectives. If we go down into a little bit more detail on the next slide, this is a vision for Felixstowe. You can see the underdeveloped land in the top right-hand corner and what it can look like. We're looking to offer up to 1.4 million square feet of new bespoke design and build facilities, state-of-the-art facilities to support those objectives of global trade, of innovation, and also in terms of creating those jobs and high value jobs and added value jobs and skills within the region. One area that we're particularly interested in is the high value logistics that could occur with it being a major hub in UK supply chains, the Port of Felixstowe being that gateway for Europe, Asia and the rest of the world. But also we're looking at investments in the new technology and potentially the usage of hydrogen. The Port of Felixstowe itself is a major UK hub for transportation and marine, and we're looking to develop a hydrogen hub in partnership with various stakeholders. If we go to the next slide, we'll show a little bit more around that. So in terms of a hydrogen hub, we've got on our doorstep offshore wind, we've got nuclear, whether that be at Sizewell or at Bradwell, and we've got solar in some of the fields within nearby Suffolk as well. And that presents an opportunity for the decarbonisation of the port and the decarbonisation of the transport supply chain. The Port of Felixstowe has around 6,000 trucks per day going through its gates. It has the 38 trains per day in and out, 250 odd pieces of internal equipment within the port as well, not to mention the vessels that are calling the port. So there's a huge opportunity, not just for the generation and of hydrogen and clean energy, but also the distribution, and that's what we're looking to develop to help the government on their 10-point plan. You see some of the partners mentioned there. Next slide, please. In terms of our second tax site, which is Gateway 14, again, you see the vision in the top right-hand corner and the aspiration below. Gateway 14 is going to offer 2.4 million square foot of purpose-built modern facilities. There is a huge ambition for this site to be a net zero vision for the site. If you can go one slide back, please. Thank you. Thank you. And one aspect that they're also looking to develop within Gateway 14 and to help with the local economy as well is to build and incorporate an innovation and skills hub for the local economy to get the skills needed to meet the high value jobs and employment required within Gateway 14, the region and the other sites within Freeport East. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then finally, last but by no means least, I want to go into a little bit more detail around our Freeport East Harwich vision and opportunity. You see in the top right hand corner a picture of Harwich at the moment. You see right in the far distance the Harwich International Port, which has 4 services a day going from the UK over to Holland and back in terms of a ro-ro, both accompanied and unaccompanied. But in the foreground is an area called Bathside Bay, and what we're looking to do is to develop that into a new terminal. We have opportunities there for it to meet demand that's coming to us in the market, and we've got a vision there to look at using that capacity to serve the offshore wind market, which is got huge demand forecast in the very near term. Next slide, please. So what our vision is for the Freeport East Harwich site is to develop a green energy hub. And why Harwich and why this particular site, and why is it something that we are extremely excited about? In terms of offshore wind, clearly there is an ambition from the government to grow that as a sector, and around 50% of offshore wind is just off our coast. And in terms of that, there are 40 gigawatts of new projects that are within 140 nautical miles of our site. And with the Freeport status and the tax incentives that can boost that growth, there's an opportunity for us here to develop something that can meet the ambitions of UK government to deliver on the growing offshore wind, but also increase that UK content needed to serve that market, as opposed to rely on overseas imports. Next slide, please. So what are the highlights for this site? Well, it's 122 hectares in size, which is somewhat sizable. And in terms of the waterfront that we're looking to develop a quay of 1.4 kilometres of waterfront with a 450-metre heavy-duty quay to handle some of the largest components required to serve the offshore wind market. We already have a local and highly skilled labour force available in and around Harwich who have been serving offshore wind for many years. And the aim is to get this project ready from 2024 to serve that market. The Freeport status would contribute to some substantial savings for inward investors and UK businesses looking to get into this market and to serve the UK from what is absolutely a perfect location just off the east coast to serve them. You couple that access to the largest container terminal with Felixstowe and the opportunity of Harwich from their ro-ro services and break bulk, plus that excellent road and rail connection to both ports. It provides a unique opportunity, and we're looking to partner with some sector leaders in this area to deliver something quite compelling for the UK. And one of the key aspects of Freeports, and Harwich is one example of this, is the aim to deliver cluster benefits, where you get complementary businesses side by side within this Freeport environment with tax and customs benefits to encourage cost savings, synergies, and to deliver a competitive advantage, as Kevin mentioned earlier, to UK PLC. Next slide, please. The advantage of this particular site and why the industry is quite excited is there is a lack of space and availability to serve this growing market. The plan for the market is actually to grow offshore wind 3 or even 4-fold from where it is today. And where it is today has taken us 20 years to get to, and the ambition to go 3 or 4-fold in terms of growth is over the next 10 or so years. So a huge demand on the horizon with a lack of supply, and supply that's logistically located in the right place. This is where we think we have an opportunity, and also it's a blank sheet of paper for manufacturers and inward investors in UK businesses to take advantage. Next slide, please. And who are we focusing in terms of this area? Certainly the offshore wind manufacturing, because we can offer flexible land allocations with that combination of closeness to those 2 ports. The Freeport status benefits that opportunity for offshore wind manufacturing, but also the aspiration of the government to increase the local content percentage in terms of serving that market. Clearly also offshore wind installation is very important in where that's located. The location is everything with regards to that, to make sure that you meet that offshore demand with a location where component parts can be assembled and clustered, and again significant laydown area is required, and 122 hectares provides that opportunity. And then eventually operations and maintenance to serve those offshore wind farms, and we already have the Galloper O&M facilities within Harwich, and to expand those to again serve those markets from an ideal location. Next slide, please. Just for those not aware, those 2 ports within Felixstowe and Harwich are owned and operated by Hutchison Ports, who are the world's leading port network with 52 ports in 26 countries around the world. Within the UK, we have 3 ports, Harwich, Felixstowe, and also London Thames Port on the Isle of Grain in Kent. But we're also part of a larger group. We're a member of the CK Hutchison Group, which have interests in various verticals, including telecommunications with the likes of 3 Mobile, some utility companies, and you see them mentioned there, but also retail companies such as Superdrug and Savers within the UK that you'll be familiar with. So a major company that's backing Freeport East and looking to deliver on the government's objectives. So next slide, please. So in summary, and at the start of the presentation, there was a poll in terms of awareness as to what the benefits might come from a Freeport. Well, Freeport East is aiming to deliver on those 3 government objectives around boosting global trade and investment, increasing innovation, and delivering on the jobs and skills and regeneration needed, but also net zero, which is a big aspect of our Freeport. We believe we can offer a springboard into Europe for UK businesses and inward investors within our Freeport, with that unique combination of deep sea services and short sea within our Freeport. 275 hectares of land, you'll remember how many football pitches that is, to offer some exciting new build to suit development opportunities. Those tax and customs benefits are significant. the development of a hydrogen hub to decarbonise transportation for the benefit of all concerned, and the ambition to create a superb green energy hub to serve that large cluster of offshore wind in one of the most deprived communities in the UK. It's an ambitious programme. It's something we're very excited about, but I hope from that presentation you can understand why we consider ourselves a global Freeport for a global Britain. Next slide, please. If you are interested at all in Freeport East and the opportunities it could offer to you and your business, my contact details are within the slide pack, which will be issued, and we'll be pleased to answer any questions. But that's my presentation concluded. So thank you for your attention, and back to you, Will.
Thank you, Mark. And as noted, this slide will be shared with everyone in the slide pack, which is going out to all registrants after the webinar. But yeah, really interesting presentation. Obviously, some great tax opportunity benefits through Freeport East, but also really great to hear about the innovations around net zero too, the hydrogen hub and some of the offshore wind work too. Really interesting stuff. So thank you, Mark, for the presentation. On to the next slide. As we enter the Q&A, we're going to just do we'll do a couple more polls. This one's just to gauge your interest levels in the opportunities at Freeport East, and it's a sliding scale from very interested to not at all interested, with a not sure option 2. But while people are answering that poll, if I may, Mark, we've had loads of questions in, but we'll try to get through as many as I can. We had a question in from David, which is kind of following on from your last point, and he asks, is Freeport East considering any partnership with overseas free zones? And he also asked, is Freeport East marketing the project to overseas companies? So yeah, that's an interesting overseas aspect there.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Clearly, there are many Freeports around the world, some of which Hutchison are involved in. It would be in the Bahamas or Hong Kong, etc. It's one where we are certainly working in collaboration with overseas entities, also with government as well. Clearly, they are looking for the Freeport policy to be successful. So we have engagement with DIT and with BEIS with regards to that. But I think there's more work to do with regards to making sure that the opportunity is fully aware to all concerned, in particular UK businesses and overseas inward investors who can add that additionality, which is the aim of the Freeport policy.
Thanks, Mark. We had another question from it's another David, who's asked, what tax benefits do employees of firms operating in Freeports get?
Yeah, so I think the main tax benefit that's being offered by government within the Freeport is with regards to employers' national insurance contributions. So within the slide, I mentioned that for the first £25,000, it's completely waived. I think for a period of up to 9 years, but don't necessarily quote me on that. But it's there to encourage the jobs into the Freeport and to give the employers the incentive to increase those jobs. But it's a fair package. And then in addition to that, you've got rates relief for the businesses as well from an OPEX point of view. And then, as previously mentioned, many benefits from a CapEx side of things, from stamp duty being waived and enhanced buildings and capital allowances to encourage that investment. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. I'm just going to share the results of that poll now. So thank you everyone for responding. Over half of you are either quite interested or very interested. So very good numbers there. 10% not very interested, 6% not at all, possibly not located in the east of England. Who knows what reasons there, and 23% not sure. So thank you everyone for responding to that poll. But we'll do just a few more questions. And Kevin, if I can bring you back in, we've had a couple of questions on the trade aspects. So Catherine asks, will you be able to move UK export controlled military or dual-use items via UK ports, as it is currently not permitted to move UK export controlled goods via free trade zones? So export controlled goods question there, Kevin.
Yeah, it's again, thank you for the question. It's a good question. I guess, like anything, the nature of businesses and the due diligence around businesses operating in freeports will be very much down to the freeport operator. It is fair to say, I think, as I indicated earlier, that the emphasis probably will be on certain types of products that certainly clean energy, net zero, as I've indicated, medical devices, nutritional foods, certain agri-foods, for example, will be have a sort of particularly emphasis attached to it. It will be, some to some extent, I think we want to make sure, and I'm sure the Freeports want to make sure that they operate in the context of the OECD and World Free Zones Safe Zone program. So yeah, I think in answer, it is potentially down to the Freeport operator, but the regulation would suggest that those types of products would not be favourable.
Thank you, Kevin. And question, so going back to obviously what can happen to products within a Freeport in terms of different processing options. So Claire's asked this question: if materials are processed into a finished product in a Freeport and the origin of the finished product is UK, what tariff applies on the release of that finished product to the economic territory of the UK? Kevin.
Right. Okay. So let's just work this one through. So if you have imported goods, even if they go into a Freeport and then sometime in the future they're released to free circulation, the import duty is still payable on the imported goods. Now, in the case of that, it would be based on the raw materials, unless following tariff inversion that the finished product has a lower rate of duty than the actual imported goods. So import duty is still payable on the raw materials element of it, based on the clearly the origin of the goods. So if there is a free trade agreement, economic partnership agreement, or its generalized system of preferences, GSP, for example, it will depend on whether there is a trade agreement or trade preference agreement with the importing nation. But if it's released, as said, to the home economy, free circulation, it will duty would be payable on the imported goods to the level of the raw materials that are imported. But again, depending whether there is a trade agreement with the exporting country.
Thank you, Kevin. I hope that's helped Claire. And another question in from Sylvia, who's asked, what other customs simplifications are available within the Freeport apart from things like inward processing relief?
So you have the concept of customs warehousing as well. So it effectively goods held in a customs warehouse. So I guess when you think about sectors that could benefit sectors such as fashion, high-end fashion, for example, you could have things like outward processing as well that comes into play. And again, I think in terms of some of these customs special procedures, that the Institute do provide specific support in these areas, because there are specific requirements in terms of record keeping compliance for inward processing, outward processing, customs warehousing, but it's definitely very, very well worth considering.
Thanks, Kevin. And just on the topic of warehousing, if I can bring Mark back in, we had a question from Gilray, who was asking around what warehouse space capacity there may be within the new Freeport area. This seems to be becoming increasingly topical with e-commerce leading to kind of greater uptake of warehousing. So just wondering, what will the kind of capacity be like in Freeport East?
Yeah, so I mean, we have the opportunity for 1.4 million square foot of development in Felixstowe and 2.4 million square foot of development in Gateway 14, which is near Stowmarket. However, with regards to pure warehousing, or let's call it some basic logistics, I don't necessarily see that as being the aim of the Freeport, because the Freeport is there around added value, potentially some processing or some higher value logistics. So it really will depend on the type of warehousing opportunity that's been prescribed. But certainly Freeport East is creating that impetus of encouraging that inward investment in warehousing and logistics infrastructure within the region.
Thanks, Mark. And I'll do one last question. It's from Edward, who's asked a few different questions, and I'll ask his first one, which I think is probably a bit interesting. So he's asking whether people have been looking at distributed ledger technologies to give better supply chain efficiencies. I mean, Kevin, could you say a little bit more about how this may fit in within some of the technological innovations you're talking about? I'd be very interested to see just a little bit more from Mark about kind of where things like distributed ledger may fit in terms of the innovations at Freeports.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start first of all. It is fair to say there is a lot going on in the blockchain distributed ledger space globally, and the capture of information, the things like track and trace within the supply chain. So there's a lot going on there, and I guess that also includes, if we use an example of goods coming from Africa, to actually demonstrate the provenance. So when the consumer purchases the goods on the UK supermarket shelf, they've got that provenance. They can understand this. It has a sustainability rating attached to it, and they have full visibility of movements within the supply chain. So there is a lot going on in that space. Key will be the different actors in the supply chain being willing and able to, if you like, sign up to the platforms and being able to evidence the different elements. And using my example, that starts very much from the grower in for example, Africa, the exporter, to, for example, the wholesaler distributor in the United Kingdom, in this example, the logistics providers, the carriers, right through, obviously, using my example, to the supermarket chain. So it's important that all actors in that supply chain are key, and that is to some extent what the Institute are actually looking to do in our Kenya activity, which we've announced, and in other parts of Africa, and in other trade corridors as well, not just Africa. So again, yeah, we are speaking with a high number of actors in the supply chain, and if there's any, obviously, sorry to use the term actors, if you're in that, then please by all means contact the Institute. So we are speaking at the moment with a number of net zero clean energy companies, agri-food, nutritional food. So thank you. It's a really great question.
You'll see now I've just launched a poll to give you an opportunity to opt in for further information from Hutchison Ports if you'd like more information about Freeport East. Mark, do you have anything to add to Kevin's answer on the kind of technological innovation piece?
I think just very briefly, clearly supply chain visibility and ensuring that the goods flow through the port and through the Freeport is a key consideration. Port of Felixstowe was one of the pioneers of port community systems in terms of Destinate, with MCP providing that. And also we are running a 5G pilot within Felixstowe. And that new technology obviously presents opportunities to look at greater supply chain visibility from end to end to benefit all concerned from that perspective. So yeah, I think building on the points that Kevin was making, it's certainly an area that we need to look at and how we might develop those going forward.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kevin. We have slightly overrun, actually, so I'm going to start wrapping up now. We did receive absolutely loads of questions, so thank you, everyone, for writing in. Various questions on Freeports at a UK level in general, some of the loads of detailed questions about the customs procedures. So it's clearly a topic we're going to be coming back to later in the year. So thank you everyone for the questions, and do keep your eyes peeled for our future webinars on Freeports. But yeah, really interesting presentations today. Thank you once again, Kevin and Mark. We hope everyone has found that useful. Please do look on the site for more information about our other upcoming webinars. We've got a webinar on Monday, for example, in which you can ask our panel of experts, including Kevin, about the impact of the new rules that were brought in at the start of the year for imports from the EU into Britain. You can find details of all of our webinars on export.org.uk. For now, though, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll leave the poll open for a minute or two, but we look forward to seeing you on the next one. And please do let us know what you thought of today's webinar in the exit survey. Great. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.